Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, Blue Marble Riders. You remember when your parents told you you had to eat your main course, your entree, your heavy entree, before you could eat your dessert? Well, so do I. But I'm here to tell you, I've learned that in fact, in certain situations, you can do the exact opposite. I'm going to tell you, you can eat your dessert, you can have the sweet before you have the main course. See, when I started reading Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, that heavy entree of a book, well, it took me 3 bites over 15 years. And I wish that I had come across the dessert, the sweet and interesting book by Mark Richardson called Zen Now, on the trail of Robert Pirsig and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If I could have, I definitely would have read that book first before I tried Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Robert Pirsig's 1974 tome, wonderful book. It's about his journey across from Minnesota to San Francisco with his son Chris on the back of his Honda Superhawk 305cc twin, is celebrated as perhaps one of the most, if not the most, poignant motorcycle book ever written. And yet, it's not about motorcycles, it's not about motorcycle maintenance, and one might even say, it's not a motorcycle book at all. I suspect you, like me, many of you, not all of you, but many of you, have attempted to read Pirsig's book and put it down after the first 50 pages or so. The second time I started reading it, well, I decided it's a great book. There's a nugget of something in here that's really interesting, apart from the motorcycles, but I just can't quite digest those heavy bits. So I'm going to skip from motorcycle stop and discussions with Chris and discussions and conversations with the Sutherlands, John and Sylvia Sutherland riding on the other BMW, and I'm going to skip from piece to piece there. I might even stop and read the bits about Phaedrus, his previous self, but I can't deal with their heavy philosophy by Socrates and Plato in there, the descriptions of what quality is, and the chatanauquas that he talks about, which becomes more and more of the book as you read through it. Finally, on my third reading, I managed to digest the tome, and I went through it. What a great book it is. Wonderful. But it left me with more questions than answers. I didn't really understand who Robert Pirsig was, even after we went through the journey and realized, of course, that this isn't a journey on a motorcycle across America, it's a journey of rediscovery for Pirsig. Pirsig fell into the depths of a deep and dark mental illness. It's never explained really why that happened. How it happened is explained, but not why. And this journey is that rediscovery of who he was before, because after Phaedrus, as he calls himself, falls into that deep and dark, murky place, he ends up getting electrotherapy, electroshock therapy, which is designed to erase vast chunks of his memory and to flatten his emotions. So when he comes out the other side, he starts on this motorcycle journey across the states to revisit places he knows he's got a ghost of an outline of a memory of, but he doesn't really understand why. And he decides to go visit some places on this motorbike and re-establish connection with his son, Chris, who really can't identify with his father because his father's personality's completely changed. He's become flat, almost soulless perhaps. And the book leaves you wincing in his interactions with his son. Why doesn't he just put a hand and an arm around his son? Why doesn't he tell him he loves him? Why doesn't he just make the kid feel good about himself? There's times there where you're just heartbroken for the boy having a father like this, but the further you go through it, you understand that there's something that's happened, and it was deep and it was dark, and it took a lot a lot to get him through it, and that probably this is the best compromise that Chris is ever going to get. But like I said, after reading that heavy tome, it left me really with way more questions than answers, and that's why I recommend that you consume Mark Richardson's Zen Now on the trail of Bob Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, because that book is an absolute revelation. Fourth gear takeoff, folks. Look at that. Not bad for a four-cylinder, eh? Because what Mark does is he gets on his DR600 from 1984, and he does this trip in the early noughties. I think it's sometime between 2004 2008, and he takes off from Minnesota, starting at Pirsig's home. Has written to Pirsig, interviewed Pirsig, never met him, and he goes to Pirsig's house, and he sees the people who live there now, and they take him through the house and show him some weird and wonderful things. He then meets with John Sutherland, who tells him that Sylvia will never ever talk about Pirsig's book because she doesn't like the way that she was presented in it. She'll have nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, John will. And so he talks to John, and John is a revelation. He just opens up a whole bunch of things that the book never covers, because as Pirsig goes through this book, you actually don't learn much about the true Robert Pirsig. You certainly don't learn much about Chris. You just get it from one person's perspective, the narrator's. And the narrator is not very generous with facts about Robert Pirsig, his wife, or his son. So Mark takes off on this journey, and you get to see the places where he goes, what it's like, because he has a companion website where you can go click on pictures that correspond to certain parts of the book. There's a full map there. And he goes through there and he interviews people that have met Pirsig. He interviews people who owned hotels he stayed in, and you just start to get this picture that builds and builds about the true Robert Pirsig and about what that journey actually entailed. And if you're like me, perhaps the more plain and less highfalutin aspects of the book, just the motorcycle journey. What was it like? What were the roads like? One of the things he says in his book is they want to make good time, with the emphasis on good and not time. And so his big driver is that he will never ever take a main highway. He loves the scenic roads, and this was a real revelation to him at one point. And this entire journey is done on back roads from Minnesota, 2,000 odd miles to San Francisco, and you get to see them through Mark Richardson's book. You get to read about them in more detail, and it's interspersed with wonderful reflections with people who knew or saw Robert, and in some cases some people who didn't know anything about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance from Robert Pirsig, and he's written or included them or their hotel or their campsite or their motorcycle in his book. And it's just a wonderful revelation. So I'm going to finish up by saying, if you want the big picture of Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, you need to read Mark Richardson's Zen Now. What a great book. And no, I only found out he was Canadian after I read it. Promise. But it's a really, really well written book. Highly recommended. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you like that, please click like. Don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell up there. Thanks very much. This is the Blue Marble Rider, out.
Once again, thanks for watching, everyone. If this is the first time you've watched, please consider subscribing. I do product reviews, motorcycle reviews, off-road and on-road vlogs, as well as tours. Don't forget to follow me on social media, that's Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and to like. And especially, I'm begging you here folks, subscribe. This is the Blue Marble Rider, out.